I'm Matthew Mann, also known as Matt. Served in the U.S. Army from February 1951 to January 1953. Served in the United States. I was not overseas in Korea, where the police action was going on. I had a lot of roles. After basic training, I was sent to school for supply clerk. When I finished that, I came back to my unit, and I was a supply clerk for a while until later on. After that, I became the company clerk, and I worked at that for about a year or so, and then I finished up my time in the Army as the mail clerk. In other words, I was in charge of picking up the mail every day and distributing it. So I had a few cushy jobs. They also sent me to another school for, as I call it, a propaganda school. It was the early days of propaganda, or propaganda warfare, they called it. And it was deceiving the other side with all kinds of things like, you hear about false news today. Well, I think we're the ones who invented it years ago. It took a course in journalism and public speaking. And of course, I spent the rest of my life, almost 50-some years, public speaking. So if it wasn't for the Army, I never would have been able to even stand up in front of a group of people and talk to them. But we were a unit stationed in Battle Creek, Michigan, Fort Custer. We were 90mm anti-aircraft guns. We were moved overnight at one point from Fort Custer, which was in Battle Creek, to Detroit to set up around the Ford plants with anti-aircraft to protect Henry Ford's factories from not getting blown up. And the poor neighbors woke up in the morning and they looked at the vacant lot, and here were 4 90mm guns and 4 quad 50 guns. But the thing that I like to tell my kids was the fact I was stationed in Detroit, anti-aircraft unit, and we saved Detroit from a Korean attack. And I was part of it, you see. This was my last Christmas in the Army. It was a month from my discharge. All we had was a string of lights in the whole encampment. And I had a radio, but I couldn't get anything on it till about midnight. I kept hearing it, and I kept voice saying to me, "You gotta go home for Christmas." Because I was not going home for Christmas. I was going home for New Year's. We had a choice of either one, but you couldn't do both. Well, I did some finagling, which I was pretty good at, and I managed to get myself a 3-day pass, and the leave would start after Christmas. On Christmas Eve, I went from Detroit to the airport, and I flew in the late evening, and my father had set up the Christmas tree, and he was asleep on the couch with the rest of the family, and we all went out to midnight mass. We come back from mass, we come up the steps to the house. My father opened the door, and he looked, and he said, "Maddie's home." You know, he couldn't believe it. Anyhow, we had a somewhat joyful Christmas, all the family there, but he was complaining about pain in his arms. And about 8 o'clock in the morning, my mom came in, shook me, and she says, "Wake up, I think your father's dead." I got up and I ran into the room, and sure enough, I hadn't seen him in almost a year because I was in the Army, and to be home and share his last Christmas with him. Christmas miracle, if you will, came about. I shouldn't have been home, but of course my mother was a pretty decent musician, and she knew all the Irish songs since she and my father were both immigrants from Ireland, and that's what I probably remember. And the big Irish parties in the house. If it wasn't an Irish song, it was probably White Christmas, because we always sang that